Good to be with y'all this morning. Thank you so much for the invitation. To Jeff, Madam Moderator, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you today about legacy giving. I want to tell you just a personal story of legacy, which is, I think it is by the grace of God that I am here with you at Grace Covenant Presbyterian Church this morning. In 1987, my wife was baptized in this very congregation. And Bob Eckerd was the one who did that baptism. And so I knew part of that story coming in today. But what I did not know is that Bob would be here for the first time in a few years, now retired. And I saw his name, and I said, I know you somehow. Tell me, where did you serve? And he said, right here at Grace Covenant. And I said, by chance, did you happen to be here when my wife's family was here and we got to talking and realized, yes, this was all part of that same story. So all that to say, I had to take a picture with Bob and send it to my wife and her family, and they were just overjoyed to know that connection. But I tell you that because my wife, after being baptized here, her family eventually moved to South Carolina. She eventually went to Columbia Seminary, where the two of us met. And so she continues to be a gift to the church in so many ways of service. And so I think about why it is that we talk about legacy in the first place. And that is a story that pulls on my heartstrings to know that it is not about maintaining buildings or the institution. It is about the generations of faithful disciples of Jesus Christ that benefit from us and our generosity today. Really something. So I'm just amazed that all that came together this morning. That is God at work. So I want to tell you just a little bit in the time that I have this morning with you about who I am, what I do for the Presbyterian Foundation, and most importantly, how I can help you and your congregation, whether or not you have a legacy giving program or you've never even considered it. I want to give you some thoughts to take away today that might help you and to be a blessing for you and your church in these days to come. So I work for the Presbyterian Foundation. We are one of the national agencies of our denomination. We were formed in 1799, 9 generations ago, if you're counting. And our purpose, as you see on the screen behind me, is to gather, steward, and distribute funds to serve Christ's mission. Said another way, our mission is to support your ministry and mission wherever you are. We are the oldest faith-based charitable foundation in America, and I'm proud to be part of this organization that helps so many. So, again, my name is Dana. I'm a Presbyterian minister by trade who now works for the foundation. I serve churches in Georgia and South Carolina, and my family and I now live in Savannah, so not all that far away from you. And so I cover the Southeast. So I'm here as your local person from the foundation. Should you have any questions, anything that you need help with, just know that I'm your person, and I'm happy to do so. And like I said, legacy giving is the main thrust of the conversation today, but just know that the foundation has resources for you across the board when it comes to finance and stewardship. We help churches in conversations around budgeting, annual stewardship campaigns, brochures, ideas, best practices. We help churches with investments and endowments. We have an online giving program. If your church does not have one or is looking to get a new one, just know that is something that we offer as well. So let's dive in and talk about legacy giving, sometimes also called planned giving. What you see on this screen behind me is a representation of what many of us probably would consider the assets that we have. Things like our checking account, our savings account, an IRA or retirement plan, our house, a car. And what you see highlighted in yellow there, that's the portion of our assets that we really have access to today if we're not retired. And so the vast majority of those things that we have are not things that we can use right away to pay for things. But what we know as disciples of Jesus Christ is that we cannot take any of these things with us when we go, even if it is in the middle of singing in the church choir. And so that is where legacy giving comes in. It is a conversation for you to have with your congregation, with members, about thinking about their legacy, about what it is that they want to leave the church when they move on into that kingdom of God. And we think about this whole sphere of assets and how those might be a blessing and part of our legacy that we leave behind to further support the congregation that we know and love. So, most simply, the best way to describe what planned or legacy giving is that for your donor, for that member in your pew, it is often the single greatest and most transformative gift that they will ever make in their lifetime. And what we know from our research is that one planned gift from one member typically represents 2.5 times of what that donor gave to the church across their entire life. Think about that. Every gift throughout their whole life, multiply that by 2.5 times. That is what a typical planned gift is. A question we get a lot is, what are these gifts? How are they coming to our church? You'll see a list of just a few of the most common on the screen. Number one is bequest. That is as simple as somebody has included your church in their will. Other opportunities are being listed as a charitable beneficiary of their IRA, or a life insurance policy, perhaps a trust, or even a donor-advised fund. We're not going to spend time talking about these during my conversation with you right now, but just know these are the different vehicles that we talk with your members about as they think about ways to be generous with your congregation. So as we move from there, what I want to make sure that you hear in this conversation is that I'm not asking you to go to your congregation and start talking to them about making a will, as though that is just the end-all, be-all of this conversation. The truth is, even as disciples of Jesus Christ, sometimes we are reluctant to talk about the end of life. So instead, what I think a more faithful and appropriate way to begin this conversation in your church looks like is to talk about the ministry, the work of your congregation, the mission that you're part of, and how the potential for a gift or a bequest from members of your church can have a transformative impact on your church's future ministry. And so I do believe there is a pastoral care component to this kind of work. We have to be sure that we connect the mission of our church with our members' individual calls as disciples, and how do they want to leave that legacy behind so that the Church of Jesus Christ continues to grow and be blessed by what they have done and what they have given so generously. Now, I'm going to share some good news with you, which is that for people who are considering legacy gifts, almost 4 out of 5 are planning to do so in support of organizations that they have been part of for 20 years or longer. And so what that means is that in your church, you've already got a large pool of folks that would make great candidates for legacy giving programs. Now, here's the not so good news. What percentage of Americans would you say leave an organization in their will or estate plans, like as a bequest? What percent of Americans do you think actually do this? Guess. 5%. I heard somebody's done their research. 5%. Only 5% of Americans are doing this. But here's where some of the good news comes in for this. The percentage that would leave a bequest, and this is across all Americans, is 28%, nearly 5 times as many. And that's all Americans. I can only imagine that as Christians, that number would be even higher for that church that they love and support. So what do we do with that information? So let's say that we move that 5% of actual bequests coming in, and we multiply that by 5, from 5% to, let's say, 30% in our church. What we know is the research shows that for a medium-sized church, one planned bequest is about $60,000. Imagine if you were to grow that fivefold. For a large church, where that number is $170,000 for a typical gift, multiplying that by 5. That is quite a powerful amount of resources to fund your ministry today and into the future. Now, one other good thing I want to show you, and then I'll move away from the research and get to hopefully things that you like even more than that, although as a nerd, I enjoy this. You don't need to see all the words at the bottom of this graph to see the story that it tells. Russell James is a researcher from Texas Tech, and what he did is he studied 9,500 participants over several years to look at how their giving changed after they decided to include a charitable organization like a church in their estate plans. The place where that happens, let me go back, is right here. Let me tell you what this means. What his study found is that when people decided to include a church, a charitable organization in their estate plans, their annual giving to charity actually increased tremendously as well. And this makes sense as people of the gospel, doesn't it? When we invite people to be generous and to see that as a part of their discipleship, that invitation grows and blossoms in them across their whole life. So not only are they thinking about their legacy, but they're thinking about the here and now of the church that they're part of and how do they want to support it. I think that is really good news. If you ever thought a chart could bring good news, here it is. But let's talk about some practical things, because I like to be practical when I talk with folks. And I'm going to ask our tellers, who have graciously agreed to help me on this, to hand out some brochures. You can look at these later today or when you get home, share them with a committee. I've got enough for at least one per church that's here. If you need more than one, let's make sure all those get out, and I'm sure we've got some extras for you. This is a legacy planning guide for church leaders that gives you some detailed steps of how to build or grow a legacy program at your church, and it's got my contact information as well. But since I've got just a short amount of time with you, and I do want to be a good steward of your time, I need to practice what I preach. I'm going to give you just the first two of what I call my top 10 list of things to do to build your legacy program. So number one is to tell stories that inspire, not scare. Tell me if this sounds familiar in a church that maybe you have served. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if it is, but when annual stewardship season comes around and that well-meaning treasurer gets up in front of the church to talk about pledges and gifts for the next year, and they begin like this: well, giving's a little less than it was last year, so we really need everybody to dig deep in their pockets and give a little bit more. You know that air conditioning unit is on its last legs. The roof is about 5 years past needing to be replaced. And then there's the carpet. And so we really just need everybody to give more than you can. Also, the insurance bill is going up too. And here's what I know. All of those things may be true, but they are not the things that inspire the church to give generously. What does inspire people to give generously is when they hear about how you as a congregation are making a real impact in the lives of your church and your community and your world. That's what connects. Telling those stories is what connects. and brings people's attention to generosity for that organization, for your church. If that didn't tell the story well enough, maybe if you're a visual person, this will help. No one wants to leave their legacy to this. If this is the story they hear in your stewardship program or your legacy giving program, I will go ahead and tell you that you are not destined for much success. Because what we know as the Church of Jesus Christ is that at its core, generosity is a spiritual discipline, like prayer, like being part of worship, being part of our community, and serving and sharing the love of Jesus Christ. And so how we tell those stories of how our church is doing that and helping people do that, that is what helps connect them to your legacy program, to know that your church is thinking about this for the long term, for not just next year or the year after that, but for generations to come. That is the legacy of your church that they're invited to be part of. So the other top 10 that I want to give you is related to an endowment. This, I think, goes hand in hand with a legacy giving program. If you don't have an endowment or don't even know what one is, that is okay. An endowment is when you take a set of funds, you set them aside to be invested, and ideally you draw from the income, the interest that is built from that investment, and you use that income to support the life and ministry of your church for every single year after that. It is a long-term investment. And so when you talk about a legacy program, it can be helpful to also tell your members that we're not just going to take that money and immediately spend it on whatever is got the session's eye at the moment, although there's probably great things that could be used. But when you can say we have an endowment, something that is going to be here for as long as that legacy is that you're creating, it helps give your members a sense of comfort and reassurance that you are thinking not just about next week or next year, but you're thinking about those next generations of disciples that come after you and who will be here to bring them up in the ways of Jesus Christ. And so just know, alongside that we at the foundation, this was our original calling. Our oldest endowment goes back to 1821. It was set up to create Christian education printed materials for churches that could not afford them. And I can say to you joyfully, that endowment is still here and still going strong and still helping in that purpose for which it was created. I can only wonder if the person who created that in 1821 would be just how amazed they would be to know that over 200 years later, that legacy is still going. Those are the kind of stories that we want our church members to hear and be part of. So on the screen there, again, I like a nice visual more than just a boring chart. If you were to have invested $100,000 with us in 1980, over the last 43 years, it would have tripled in value while at the same time generating over $500,000 for your mission and ministry as a congregation. That's the power of an endowment with long-term growth, is that it is creating income for you today and growing so that it can give even more income in years to come. So those are my top two. If you want to hear numbers 3 through 10 and or just have a conversation with me about what legacy giving might look like in your particular congregation, I hope you'll join us during that lunch conversation in that reception room right off of the gym. But again, I want to be good stewards of your time, so I'll just say let's continue that conversation as we go into lunch. Thank y'all for having me. It's so great to be with you today.
One last story to tell you is that our little session asked for the Presbyterian Foundation to come and meet with us as a session. There weren't any other churches in the area that were lining up meetings, but a representative from the foundation flew down on their own dime, came to our church, spent the evening with us, answered our questions, Now, what would that be like if all of you signed up for having Dana come to your session and meet not just with the pastor or with the ruling elder that's here, but with the whole session and said the kind of things that you've heard tonight? That ends our report. Thank you, Madam Moderator.